Hello, and welcome to Chatting, a podcast where people chat about how they learn and use English. My name is Sam, I'm a CELTA teacher and a performer, and I have a particular interest in pronunciation and expression. In each episode, non-native and native speakers will chat about their experiences with English, share their advice, and, at the end, I'll give some pronunciation tips for you to take away and practice. So, ready? Let's get chatting. This episode, I'm chatting with Aurora. Aurora is originally from France and currently lives in the UK. She's a classical singer, a singing teacher, and a French language coach. We met online for our chat, as we're in different countries, and the Wi-Fi held up pretty well. We chatted about the differences in the French and English sound worlds, learning English working in a pub, in this case the pub chain O'Neill's in the UK, and when you realise you get the joke in English. But I started by asking Aurora to tell me a little bit about herself.
I am Aurora and I'm a classical singer, but also have a background in languages. So languages were always my passion from a very young age. So I started studying English when I was 11 at secondary school, and then I kept going. I went to Latin, which obviously I haven't been able to speak that much, but it was very useful in terms of then understanding other languages, and with French as well, understanding my native language, because obviously the roots, a lot of it is from Latin. And then when I went on to study German, it meant that I was able to understand declensions and all these concepts, which obviously is really important in German. And then I studied Spanish, but then my favorite language was always English. So I went to university and decided to specialize in English linguistics, literature, and history.
Where you're from and your accent, would a person from France be able to tell where you're from? Do accents change a lot in France, or is it quite a general sound?
Yes, I come from the southwest of France in the Pyrenees, so the accent is very much recognizable there and completely different from the accent that you would have in the northern part of France or in Paris. And then we tend to have a more singing way of speaking as well. We speak louder, I think, in general as well, because a lot of us come from the countryside, so we're used to speaking outdoors. And then we're close to Spain. My side, we're close to Spain. The other side, they're close to Italy. And so again, there is some influence there.
You said that English was your favourite language from school. What was it about English that you enjoyed?
Well, I don't know what it was specifically. I sometimes there are things that just make sense to you and that you're just attracted to. So I guess I've always been attracted to the music of the English language. As I've said, I'm a singer and a musician. So I like the sound of the English language when you speak it, and that softness to it. And then, of course, growing up, all the pop and the cool stuff you would listen to was always in English. So that's also, I think, been a very big part of it.
Do you remember the shift from learning English at school to learning English at university? Because you said you studied linguistics. Was it very specific on the pronunciation side of it then? Sort of the phonemes and the beats in a sentence,
Yes.
that sort of thing?
Yes, that was very much, not in the first year, but then by the time you got more advanced, also actually, you didn't have to choose these modules, interestingly enough. Some of these modules you did, but because I was singing, and at that point I had a singing teacher in France, and I was really interested in exploring how to make these different vowels and sounds when I sang in different languages. And I was just at the beginning of really exploring that. So when I saw that there was an opportunity to do a module just on that at university, then I did it. And so, yes, that's where I learned about phonemes. We had been taught already about phonetics, but that's where I learned about the difference even in sounds that seem similar in French and English. And I mean, these two languages, even though we live next door, they are so different that certainly when it comes to the sound world, you couldn't be more opposite, really. And I think sometimes people don't realize that. But something like a T or a D, you know, is going to be much more forward in your tongue in French. If I was speaking with a French accent now, and I want a cup of tea, it will be a cup of tea because the que and the te in French are very much not aspirated.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, I had to learn that my tongue had to be in a slightly different position and I had to let some air through to sound British. So it would be a cup of tea. So all these nuances and again, not just imitating by ear, but really understanding what you're doing and what are the differences with the languages. This I learned at uni because I chose to specialize because I was fascinated with these different sound worlds.
Are there any particular sounds that you find tricky still, or have you found ways to even everything out?
I wouldn't say I find anything tricky by now. It's not in that sense that, but then there's probably some sounds. I think some sounds that are very difficult for French people is something like for people who know about phonetics, the inverted V. You know that sound that you get in sun. Part of me always feels like, oh, is it really native the way that I say it? And I know that it's a very difficult one. In fact, I remember one of my first jobs because I first arrived and worked in the O'Neills for a few months. I mean, that I recommend anyone who wants to really know how to speak English, go and work in a pub. You will meet and work with people with all sorts of accents and all sorts of background. This is really a baptism of fire, you know, after coming from university where I was really speaking as you write, really. Um, it was quite a shock when they laughed a lot when I
Was
spoke
it really?
because, you know, I would say like, would you mind passing me the salt to this guy? And he's like, no, I need to teach you how to speak. Nobody speaks like this. So, you know, this is one of the issues when you learn, not in the country, but in that quite formal way.
Right.
You know, that I was able to have these intellectual conversations or to write dissertations, quite complex things, you know. But then when it came to speaking on a day-to-day level, unless you're in the country really and you interact with people, that's when you learn. And then I remember that when I first arrived, the hardest thing for me actually um, was understanding people because of being in London and having this huge array of accents. My manager was from Dublin, but then the assistant manager was from Belfast. I mean, that already you've got two really interesting, contrasting things. Another of my colleagues was from South Africa, and so you had to adjust your ear all the time, really. You know, going on the bus and the bus driver, again, all sorts of accents going on there. So that was probably the hardest thing for me actually when I came, because speaking, even though at the beginning maybe I didn't speak in the most natural way, you know, but I was always able to express what I wanted to express. But then understanding people, regardless of their accent, that took me quite a few months to get used to that, and then also getting used to if you're going out with some people and you maybe all sitting, and by the time by the time you've got the joke, they've moved on to two conversations already. So this way of training your brain to sort of understand as you go along and being able to, I remember being very frustrated because, as you know, I'm quite a communicative person, that I wanted to react and say something funny, but by the time I'd really digested what had been said and my answer was there, then they'd already moved on. So it was very frustrating for a while.
Do you remember that feeling when you finally had the language ready and at the level that you could get in quickly to tell your side of the joke? Or, you know, when you felt, yes, I got that, I understood that joke, that's hilarious, and then, you know, you could contribute quicker, you know? Do
Yeah,
you remember that sort of feeling?
I remember that feeling, but it wasn't an obvious moment.
Okay.
So it was something that happened quite gradually. Um, and I think also, you know, making friendships and uh, because that's also part of it, isn't it? Feeling that you're with people and you feel so comfortable with them that you can, I don't know, if like everything, if you relax, then things tend to happen more easily. So I think forming friendships and just by that having the opportunity to talk more in English, obviously, to have proper conversations with people, because that's a big part of it. Otherwise you only know and learn how to interact for the basic things in life. But that's why, again, another thing I would say to people, if you're learning English, go and live, whether it's in England or America, go and live in an English speaking country for however long you can, because making these relationships and having this opportunity to talk on different subjects, to have the vocabulary throughout all these subjects, and that's what makes it easier for you to react quickly, because you've talked about these different things before. So, and humor is such a big part of the culture here in England. It's a very specific type of humor. Yeah, again, that's something that's very difficult to learn in books, because that humor is so ingrained in everything you say at every level of society here. And that sort of deadpan humor, that you just said something funny, but then the person might not be sure because you didn't change anything in your face. That's very British, that. And that is a whole other level of really speaking a language, which is to do with the culture. Because it's not just about knowing the words, it's about really understanding how people communicate in that language and how they use the words to, in the case of the English language, very often to say one word but mean the opposite. And how do you understand that? How do you notice that in that slight physical change in that person, or just because you've been in enough situations like that oh yes, they don't mean it. I reiterate what I said, that learning a language, you have to put the work in, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Because it's not a matter of, oh, I don't know, and then one day I know. On the way, you're constantly being able to do new things, to say new things, to understand new things. So it's a really fun journey, but you have to look at it as a journey and really enjoy it on the way. And I think one big thing that I would say, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because that is how, first of all, that's how you learn, and also it's only by communicating, your brain has to put together all these different things for you to really be able to become more fluent in that language. So speak and speak and speak, and it doesn't matter if there are mistakes. You will learn from them, but people will still understand you. And while you're in that process, you will make mistakes until one day, suddenly you realize you're not really making mistakes anymore. But I think, like I was saying before, when was that moment that I felt, oh God, it's like being in France for me. I'm thinking in English, I'm speaking English with people, I can have the same humor, I can react like this, like I was in French. There wasn't a moment. It just happened gradually. So it's the same with making mistakes and all these things. You just keep doing it until as you improve, then, one day you won't.
I think that's fantastic. This is a really great point from Aurora. Language learning is a journey, so enjoy it. We know it can be frustrating at times, but the feeling of success when you ask a good question, understand a conversation, or get a joke is totally worth it. So, this episode's pronunciation tip is about, as Aurora said, the inverted V. This is the symbol on the International Phonetics Alphabet Chart that looks like an upside down V, or like a pointy hat. This is the sound, and can be a tricky one for learners when they want to make the difference between and o. When you make these two sounds, notice how your mouth shape changes. Relax your jaw and tongue, open the mouth for and then move your lips forward a little to make o. Almost like your lips are making an O shape. O. Here are 3 sentences to practice the different sounds. First, the words cup what you use to hold tea or coffee, and cop, an informal word for a police officer. Try this sentence. This cup belongs to that cop. Next, the words hot, a high temperature, and hut, a small building usually made of wood. Try this sentence. Is it hot in that hut? Finally, the words bottom, the part of your body you sit on, or the base or end of something, and button, something you press or something on your clothes to fasten them. Try this sentence. Press the bottom button to get in. So, to recap, these sounds have very similar mouth shapes. Just bring your lips forward a little to change from the to the o. Over to you to practice. So, there we are. The transcript of this episode is available to read on the podcast's webpage, so take a look. Join me next time for more pronunciation and grammar tips, more advice, and most importantly, more chatting. My thanks again to Aurora, and for her music, a huge thanks to the wonderful Mara Carlisle. Bye for now.